Robson again, getting it back from Stapleton. He's on his way. Can he find the shot? Brilliant goal!
Cantona making the early run. Here he is! Lovely goal! Lovely goal!
Oh, fantastic skill from the Argentinian international. Still Redondo. It's Raul. Raul walking away with it. Green off his far post. Jimmy Green off. Best again. What a player this boy is. He's got another.
Hi and welcome to United Rewind, the podcast that revisits classic Manchester United matches. I'm Rob Smythe and with me, as always, is Daniel Harris. And this week, to get you in the mood for Christmas, we're going to look back at the festive classic.
Yeah, this episode's United Rewind is the brilliant 2-0 home win over Newcastle on 27th of December 1995. Maybe Roy Keane's first great game for United.
Now, before we get into the brilliance of Cole, Cantona, Keane and the rest, let's discuss the brilliance of Fernandes, Marshall and Scott McTominay. What did you make of Sunday?
Yeah, it went well, didn't it?
Yeah, another lucky win for Ollie, eh?
It's unbelievable the way that he keeps happening upon these tactics, despite the fact that he doesn't know anything about tactics.
It's honestly, it's really starting to do my head in now. There wasn't a scintilla of credit for the way he basically set the team up to butcher Leeds. It was all anyone spoke about was how naive Leeds were, all this simplistic shite. Like if it was that easy, why United the first team to take them to the cleaners?
Yeah, I think that partly it is they have the right players, and that is another thing that it's apparently not allowed. We're not allowed to give Ole any credit for the players that he signs, the players that he coaches, and the players that he picks. It's just the fact that the players happen to be good.
Yeah,
and I mean, the best example of this is Bruno Fernandes, who Ole knew that United needed a player of that sort. He signs a player of that sort who is so good it's completely unbelievable. And then when United win, it's just Bruno. It's nothing to do with Ole. And the thing about Bruno is just the pressure that he had to come in and be immediately brilliant must have been quite intense. Yet everything he did in Portugal, he's doing here. He's scoring brilliant goals. He's scoring crucial goals. He's scoring clutch goals. He just guarantees goals. And you're also getting leadership. You're getting effort. You're getting edge. And you're getting personality. So I had to look at the numbers. And he's 27 league appearances for United, 17 goals and 12 assists. And then in all competitions, he's 42 games, 25 goals, 14 assists. And obviously there's so much more to it than that. But when you have those kind of numbers as a basis, I was starting to think, if you were offered any player in the world and in return you had to give them Bruno, who would you take? Is there anyone you would take?
Yeah, not many actually, because even the greats like Mane, maybe De Bruyne, but yeah, I know what you mean because he's so influential on his own, whereas people like Mane and Salah are part of a kind of bigger thing.
And De Bruyne, even, is he good in a team that's just playing well? Has he ever elevated it? He's not elevating them now, for example.
No, it's a really good point actually. Nobody comes to mind, which I'm sure some people say is ludicrous pro-United bias, but genuinely, you're right. To have the ability
to... in the world. We've settled it right now.
The thing is, I remember looking at his numbers in Portugal and think they were really eye-watering and thinking he clearly could be very good, but he's not going to keep up that level of performance in England, and he actually has.
In this league.
As soon as this league.
Well, that's the thing. It was impossible not to be suspicious of the numbers because they were so stupid, his numbers.
Yeah, it was like 34 in a season, wasn't it, or something?
And to be the age that he was and still be at Sporting, you're thinking there must be something here doesn't add up.
Yeah, and the fee as well, which was, what was it, 50 odd million? Which is
it wasn't loads. Yeah, no, not loads for a player of that quality who's just immediately come in and done everything that you hoped he would do and more.
Yeah, the fact you could legitimately, in different ways, compare him to Robson and Cantona kind of says everything.
The first time when Leeds came back up in the 90s, the first time they beat United, I had a mate who used to go and watch Leeds, still does go and watch Leeds. And he sent me and another United fan, we used to get letters in the post from him with like abuse. I remember getting the one that said, "Ma, sing, ah," when we got these letters. And there was one about Brian Dean spies the Man U net, Brian Dean, Fergie's in a sweat, in off the bar, fuck Cantona, Brian Dean. When we're getting all these letters when Leeds beat us for the first time. So I'm now 42.
Have you got I was going to say, have you got his address?
Yeah, I was about to say, I just said I'm now 42. I'm not 42, I'm 41. So I even know my own age at this point. But yeah, he is receiving letters from us and from our kids.
Make sure they're handwritten just for the extra flourish.
I'll stick one on Twitter.
Yeah. Anyway, a few people have been in touch via unitedrewind@gmail.com. Thanks to all of you who have emailed so far. John de Gruyther, I think that's how you pronounce it, but apologies if not, sent us an email. He said, I wanted to share a memory of the first game I attended at Old Trafford. It was a League Cup game against York City that United lost. 3-2, 3-0 a pasting. Me and my mate had bugged off school and got a supporters bus from Gloucester. It was a transit van with benches in the back. The game itself I remember being terrible, but that's probably unfair to York. Two big things stayed with me though. Watching Giggs in real life was magnificent. What a majestic player. He was everywhere and mercurial. The other was watching Terry Cook. He looked amazing and we were all convinced he was a real deal. The talk on the terrace was of that nature as well. I wonder what your thoughts are on Cook and your memories of this game. Well, yeah, I mean, I know you've got some memories of York, but first of all, on Cook, he really did. There was so much hype around him, and not long after the York game, he made his league debut against Bolton, played really well. I think he made one for Giggs, and then he scored in the return game when he beat York 3-1, but went out on aggregate. And then he just really faded. I was looking into it. He got a cruciate injury in 97 because there were all those videos of him and Keane rehabbing together. But even between sort of autumn 95 and the injury, the 2-year period, he kind of disappeared. I'm not exactly sure what happened. I know he went on loan to Sunderland, but the following season he couldn't even get in the League Cup side. So my first thought was to say, well, he would have made it but for the cruciate injury, but actually it feels like
it was before that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was already on. I don't know, was it? I've got it in my head that it would talk about his attitude, but I don't know what that's based on.
I don't remember that. I mean, I think sometimes just playing for United is a lot. So it may have been the case that he wasn't good enough to play for United and the cruciate kind of ruined what he might have done somewhere else.
But he looked like he really fancied it, didn't he? He was full of swagger against, but I know it's only Bolton and so.
I remember the goal with the flick.
Round the corner and then he
I know exactly what I was doing the day of that York game, because I was friends at school with Israelis with long hair. Anyone familiar with 90s Jewish North London won't be surprised to hear that, and they also won't be surprised to hear that their parents had liberal interpretations of what constituted parenting, or they understood that there was more to life than school. So these lads were, when we were like 13, 14, they were going to see punk and metal bands you've barely heard of, like Rancid and Biohazard at the Highbury Garage on a school night. And then they would often have the following day off. And actually, years later, I was working with someone who also had long hair, and we were walking down the street, and I saw a Biohazard sticker on a bike. And I pointed it out, and he was like, how the fuck do you know what a Biohazard sticker looks like? I was like, well, this is why. And so Green Day at the time were a touring Dookie. And so they were still a punk band, but they were sort of just on the edge of like the indie that I was into. So I went to Brixton to see Green Day, and it was the kind of crowd where you get like white men with dreadlocks in their beard and dyed beard, all that kind of thing. And we were like crowd surfing and stage diving, all this kind of shit. And I remember discovering them showing me that you could literally run up to people, belt them, and no one minded.
Yeah, I know. I remember around that time we used to go to this indie disco in, what's it called? It's somewhere in Gillingham anyway, in Kent. And basically, the mosh pit was absolutely ludicrous. The
Gillingham mosh pit.
Honestly, seriously, I look back now and think actually, because the strange thing is, on Saturday nights it was just a normal cheesy club, but like absolutely diabolical. But on Friday nights it turned into this like heavenly indie disco. It was bizarre. So Green Day was the night of the York game,
and I remember coming out of Brixton and calling my dad on a payphone to find out how United got on, and lost 3-0. I mean, to me, it's always known as, the Green Day game in my head, but really it's the Pat McGibbon game.
Yeah, exactly. Which we'll cut. So he got sent off, didn't he? Was that his only game for United? Override penalty and got sent off. I think it was. He's actually on the bench in today's game, which we'll come to. Another quick email from Bill Stevens, who's from Canada. He said, my wife and I were fortunate to attend a match at Old Trafford in 1970. We paid extra to sit down for the match. 50 pence still seems like a good investment. It was wonderful to watch Best and Charlton score the goals. Many years later, I discovered a film made by a German crew, footballers never before. They just followed Best with a camera during the whole match. Apart from the goals, a treasured memory I've retained for 50 years is the sight of Nobby Stiles as he collapsed when the referee backed into him. The crowd roared. That game was against Coventry, wasn't it?
I think so.
Is that video widely available? I've seen like a bit of it on YouTube, but because obviously there was a lot made of the Zidane film, which essentially was a similar thing. I'd love to see that Best film in its entirety.
Yeah. What do you make of the Zidane film?
My main memory of it is the soundtrack, which I absolutely love. the Mogwai soundtrack. I didn't. It was all right. I thought. I've only watched it once.
I remember seeing it, watching men getting led out by wives, and it's like, how did the conversation about this film go? It's 90 minutes of Zinedine Zidane, but it's also a romantic comedy. It was just like, I mean, I went,
Yeah.
like, not that. I mean, if it's not even like obviously it's not a husband-wife thing, but if you've told someone, how have you sold this to someone such that they're walking out during the film because their understanding of what the film is and what the film actually is so different. The only other film I've seen where I remember such a parade of people leaving was Requiem for a Dream, which is much more understandable.
Yeah, the only one I remember loads of people leaving was Human Traffic, and I was one of them. I couldn't stand it. Here's one: if you could do it,
back up. What wasn't to like about Human Traffic?
Well, maybe it's aged well, and maybe I see the world through different eyes now. But at the time, I just found it so, I don't know, just in your face. Just no. But also, it was a world I didn't understand. I kind of wanted to understand it, but I just felt it was so extreme and over the top. Now maybe that represents it well. I don't know.
I mean, it is a bit dated now, but I absolutely, I mean, it's probably a little bit
not for me, Clive. Actually,
I love Human Traffic.
One thing about it I did like the soundtrack, and it was a brilliant song called "Scared" by a band called Lucid, who I'd never heard anything of before or since. And I've googled them, and you can't really find anything at all. So who knows where that came from? A quick one: if you could do as a damn film with one player of any era, who would it be?
I mean, the obvious answers are, I mean, sort of one of them here is George Best, and the other one's sort of Maradona. But then I think about Norman Whiteside. I think it would be hard not to take Norman Whiteside in that Liverpool semi-final or against Arsenal, where he booted them off the pitch. Just seeing the
facial expressions and everything.
Yeah, and just the constant, because the thing is, I think I said this at the time when we did the Liverpool game, it wasn't so much the severity of the violence, but the frequency.
Yeah, exactly. He was an absolute master of niggling people. Anyway, should we get into this week's match?
I think just to go back to those, because I keep playing in my mind, like, and this is probably a good sign about United, that I feel like I'm thinking about United a lot at the moment. And the thing that keeps nagging at me to go back to actual United right now is that if United should be better now than they were last season. And if they can produce a run similar to the one they produced from February to the end, that will take them close.
I think they could definitely finish second. I still think Liverpool will run away with that.
I mean, they are the second best team. I don't feel. I'm not very conflicted about saying that United are the second best team, and I agree that Liverpool are the best team. But all I'm saying is United won a lot of consecutive games, and they went on a run last season, and so if that run is not beyond them, then it will be closer than I think you're saying now.
The game at Anfield, it's early in January or mid-January, isn't it? It's absolutely huge. Not just for obvious reasons, but I think if anyone, United or any other team, are going to win the league, someone has to undermine Liverpool by beating them at Anfield very soon. If it's United, then so much the better.
Yeah. I mean, that would be. I think if they can come out of Christmas with a similar gap to now, then something could happen. If they end up not beating Leicester and Wolves or Liverpool, then it will be over.
Yeah, agreed. Right, this week's match, talking of Christmas, it was a brilliant 2-0 win over Kevin Keegan's Newcastle at Old Trafford on December 27th, 95. Just the context of the game, which is quite important. So Newcastle had that amazing start to the season after buying Ferdinand and Ginola. United had sold, obviously, it's Hughes Kanchelskis and put all the kids in. Newcastle were 10 points clear of United. And Tottenham, actually, I forgot were in third at this point. Liverpool and Arsenal were a point behind. Middlesbrough a point further back. So it was really congested apart from Newcastle. Essentially, it was seen as like an absolute must-win for United, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. They actually talked about it on Sky. I remember they said something like United only have 5 clean sheets in 19 games that season. And I think one of the things was that they'd lost the previous game to Leeds and they'd lost the game before that to Liverpool 2-0. But that was maybe Schmeichel's best game for United. Without Schmeichel, that game could have been something obscene.
Yeah, it could.
I was having a look at the charts for around this time. Number one on the charts was, and I defy you not to do this, not everyone to now be doing the hand gesture, was Two Become One by the Spice Girls. I'm sitting here doing it now.
That was a year later, wasn't it?
Oh, I think you might. Yeah, I think. Oh, do you know what I just did? I just looked at 96, and you're right.
It's okay.
What a bad end. Okay,
But,
fine.
but no, well, yeah, I might as well go quickly the chart. Earth Song was Christmas #1, great. There were 2 Wonderwalls in the top 7. Mike Flowers Pops at
Mike
2.
Fabricant's Pops is what I
Yeah.
now think of.
Oasis at 7. It's a real mix. There was that Beatles song "Free as a Bird" in the top 10. Missing by Everything But the Girl, which is really good.
Which is and most Missing Everything by the Girl is Everything But the Girl is a classic, but
Yeah.
Wonderwall is the kind of song that at that point was just absolutely everywhere, and I can't think of too many singles before or after that where it's just been everywhere you go, sort of define that period. Although now looking at the charts from then, like Gangster's Paradise was also like that at the time. Where you've just got just these absolutely unbelievable singles that come to define a period. And we had it's weird to like look at the charts and say, well, actually, it wasn't even just one song that defined the period. It was 2 that were just all over the show.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a real mix, actually. There's some really quality stuff in there, and also a Robson and Jerome double A side and things like that.
Robson and Jerome.
Yeah, so it's worth. You're right about the form going into it. United had a terrible December. They'd failed to win in 5. I think the first game was right at the end of November at Forest. So Newcastle obviously opened up that huge gap. They were without Bruce and Pallister, which I didn't notice, but there's a great stat on the commentary. It was the first time since Pallister had joined 6 years earlier, 6.5 years earlier, that neither of them had played in a league game. So it was a huge thing. They had May and Gary Nev playing centre-back. May would then go off injured at half-time, which meant Keane going to centre-back. But yeah, I'll just run through the United team quickly. So 4-4-1-1 or 4-4-2, whatever. Schmeichel, Irwin at right-back, May, Gary Nev, Phil Nev, then Beckham, Buck, King, Giggs, which had an average age of, I think, just under 22, that midfield at that point, and then Cantona and Cole. Subs, McClare, Scholes, and I'd totally forgotten that Pat McGibbon was on the bench.
I think one of the things I think about with that team is I remember the midfield for Leeds was Butt, McClare, Keane and Beckham.
Beckham on the left, yeah.
Yeah, and that's just, you didn't see that very often. You could see why they lost that game, because the balance just is totally wrong there.
Giggs had missed most of December, and he played at Anfield, but he missed the rest. So it was a huge thing having him back. But I think he had a bruised foot, so he wasn't 100% fit, but he was absolutely electrical game.
And looking through the papers the day of the game, one of the things that struck me was that the front page of The Guardian is dickhead Tories arguing amongst themselves about
the EU.
EU. It's just like, oh my God, like this is where we are. And I looked at what was on telly, and they had Animal Hospital, Down Under, Christmas special with Rolf Harris. And it's just like with every little couplet, it gets worse and worse and worse. And it's just I was thinking, where would you go to now to make this better? You're adding like, and special guest Ian Huntley. I mean, where on earth is it going? But the Sky coverage was absolutely phenomenal. You've got Richard Keys, who's wearing this very strange sort of mottled beige blazer. And then you've got Barry Venison, who's wearing a jacket that looks like a bathrobe and is made out of Porter's trousers material.
It's just wonderful, isn't it?
It's just the absolutely weirdest thing. And I mean, Richard Keys. I always ever wonder how Richard Keys got this job and not the late great Mike Morris, who used to do TV AM Sports News. But he says if United don't win tonight, the campaign is as good as over. And he points out that Newcastle haven't won the title since 1927. Here, quick question. What else happened in football in 1927?
I have a clue. Go on.
Well, obviously lots of things, but there's one thing that happened in 1927 that's never happened before and never happened after.
No idea.
And the answer is the FA Cup left England. Cardiff City beat Arsenal 2-1 in the cup final that season.
Very good, very good.
A favourite quiz question of my uncle's.
Yeah, Venison was quite a big pundit around that time, wasn't he? He used to appear a lot. Every time I looked at him, I kind of half saw Killer Bob from Twin Peaks, which I know is blatant prejudice against long hair, but honestly, I genuinely couldn't. Like, if you just saw it out of the corner of your eye. But anyway, yeah, Newcastle's team, just quickly, they had all the usual: Beardsley, Ferdinand, Ginola. Philippe Albert was injured, but that was about it.
Talking of the Newcastle team, actually, I remembered watching, because Warren Barton was playing for Newcastle, and I remembered, well, I think it was 1993. I went with a group of mates from school to watch the Evening Standard London Five-a-Sides, which was, as it says on the tin, just all the London clubs get together and play five-a-side at Wembley Arena. And where we were sitting, there was by coincidence, a bunch of much older kids from school who were in sixth formers were also there. And they were just giving Warren Barton absolute pelters. It was in the Wembley Arena, so it's quite tight relative to like a football ground. And obviously there are fans of all the different London clubs not sitting together and just random people like me who were just there. So there's no atmosphere really or anything. So there's not a lot of noise. And just every time Warren Barton gets the ball, they're going, hoof, as loud as they could, all of them. And then they're going really like classy touch, Warren, come on, Wazza, and just absolutely giving him pelters all the way through. And actually, Wimbledon did actually get to the final where they lost on penalties to Watford. I had to look that up. I didn't remember that. But they just gave him absolute stick from the beginning of the night until the end of the night. And the other thing I remembered was Lee Clark, who I remember as a kid being really impressed reading an interview with Lee Clark, I think probably in 442 or Shoot or Match or somewhere, where he said he loved Newcastle and the only team, if Newcastle didn't want him, he'd just go and play for Gateshead. And I remember thinking that was very impressive. And then obviously he ends up at Sunderland. And I thought, absolute hypocrite. But then he turns up at the 1999 Cup final with that T-shirt on which it says "Sad Mac and Bastards" and never plays for Sunderland again.
Good lad.
Before the game, actually, they first did a little feature on Sky where they compare Ferdinand and Cole, and they compare Cole unfavourably to Ferdinand. And then they have an interview with Keegan, who's obviously wearing the bench coat that he seemed to just never not to be wearing. And he said the players needed very little team talk to be motivated. And it's like, I remember watching it thinking, is your job not anything else? And then he says it's all about how we play. And I remember thinking it's nice to hear that as a player, but you're playing a team that has Keane and Cantona and Cole and Giggs in it. And I couldn't imagine a situation where a Fergie team went out for such a big game and he didn't properly rev them up.
Well, no, it's a good point. Beresford, I remember seeing, I forget where, maybe Match of the 90s, said Keegan would come in with the team sheet, the opposition, every week, sort of look at it and go, well, if we can't beat these, we should be 2-0 up at half-time. And that was pretty much the extent of his team talks. But, something worked up to the point where he empowered them to play with freedom and so on.
And they have really good players. And, I mean, there was also that little period where Rob Lee suddenly became a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, around this time, actually, he scored some really important and good goals.
Yeah. More recently, he's been protesting Newcastle's right to be owned by human rights abusing plutocrats. But there was just that period where he was sort of, it was like in the early days of Fantasy League as well, where he became very briefly this midfield player that was scoring loads of goals. Yeah, and changing his name from Robert to Rob. I don't know if that was a process you two went through.
I can't ever remember being a Robert, apart from when I used to get bollocked by my mum. That was the only time.
I think my mum is also the only person who calls me Daniel till my wife started calling me it.
Yeah, you're in the shit then. Should we crack on to the game? A glorious.
Should we remind ourselves of what happened?
Yes, let's do that.
You can expect plenty of motoring from Manchester United tonight. In front of their own fans again. It's Giggs to Cole! Well, Newcastle know all about him, and they're on the receiving end. Alec Ferguson is thrilled. Andy Cole is thrilled.
What a magnificent strike. And I bet you had he not scored at Leeds, he wouldn't have scored tonight. Watch the ball from Giggs. Quite magnificent. The finish, even better. That is all about Andy Cole. That is the quality this boy possesses. Takes it first time. That was a difficult thing. But look at the accuracy. Look at the power he got in from the side foot. It's a magnificent finish from Andy Cole.
Struck to go with the skill and sophistication of tonight's game. Giggs and Butt get in each other's way. And it's Howie and it's Ferdinand and there's no flag. But he couldn't emulate Andy Cole at the other end. Beckham bends it in. Retrieved by Cole. Phil Neville. Keane wants it again, and Keane has got it. Roy Keane for Manchester United. That's absolutely wonderful.
Well, what a finish. What a ball from Beckham. The way he looked up, Ryan Giggs almost had a go at him for not giving him a short pass. But Beckham looked up, spotted Keane's run round the back. And what composure. Look at the way, watch Giggs come into the picture. Look, he wants it. Give me it, he said. Give me the ball. You can't have it, he says. wanted something. When you want composure, well, Roy Keane had all of that and more. What a finish.
So, Corson Hardware tweets, and he says, was still, inverted commas, feeling the effects of being out clubbing in Manchester the night before, and was going to the match with my mate's dad at the time. Went to the game still up from the previous night, and the bloke next to me kept giving me his brandy to sip on. Jeez. Now, that is a monumental effort. When I first read this, I was thinking, and I guess I was searching my own experience for similar kind of behaviour, where you turn up at a match, but it's usually a morning kickoff.
Yeah,
but to still be buzzing from the night before. Yeah. The following night suggests an absolutely monumental night that was a lot more than a night. So, well done. Chapeau, Mr. Corson Hardware.
Yeah.
And then we got another message from Whistling Spy who says, so cold. Didn't the undersaw heating pack up after the game? And I think what you ended up with was the grass was frozen and the soil was warm.
Yeah.
That's what Martin Tyler said.
Yeah, it was absolutely, it was sub-zero, wasn't it? I think in parts of Scotland, it was as cold as something like -15, -20.
I remember that's the coldest I can recall being in England. And Stephen Costello says, was absolutely freezing. Met my cousin's mate there who was dead superstitious and wore the same clothes to every game of the season. So he didn't even have a coat on. I'm not sure I've ever seen him since, so maybe hypothermia did him in.
I did actually look for the cliche topless Newcastle fans, but they didn't show them. Yeah, it's funny about the pitch.
So what I looked for was... to see which players on which teams were wearing short sleeves and wondered if we could extrapolate why United go on to win this game because they've got more players who are wearing short sleeves.
Have they? That's interesting.
And I'm pleased to report that the answer to that is yes. Wearing short sleeves for Newcastle were Michael Bolton, Darren Peacock, John Beresford, Peter Beardsley and Les Ferdinand. Whereas for United, the only players wearing short sleeves were Cole Cantona, Giggs, Phil and Nicky Butt. So they won the performative hardness trophy, though Peter Schmeichel was wearing trousers, which that sort of told you it was bloody cold because if thinking about where he would have grown up and how cold it must have been where he grew up. He also had the most dreadful hair, perhaps, of all time. Like the proper, bowl cut, flat, lifeless.
Oh, yeah, with the step.
Curtains, step. Just like everything that was terrible about early 90s hair, he is still displaying in the mid-90s.
1995. Keane had quite a long kind of unkempt haircut as well.
Dwight York once told a mate of mine that the Keane's hair is basically a window to his soul.
Yeah, no, totally. Statement haircuts when he'd have the shave. And I always thought, 98, when he came back for the Charity Shield, proper number one all over, and then first thing he did was boot Vieira up in the air. Proper statement haircut.
Yeah. I think they were saying that mentally he was all over the place if the hair and the beard were wild, and he was focused if the hair was short.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about the kits, actually. Newcastle's is one of the most... I don't know if iconic's the right word. I know the away kit that went with this one, the kind of reddy, purpley stripe hoop thing has become an iconic kit. But it screams 1990 because it's got 1995 or 6 because it's got that granddad shirt straight off the peg at Top Man vibe to it. It looks like someone's gone round those shops and thought, what are people buying? Yeah. I know that. Whereas United's is probably my favourite home kit of the 90s, I think.
Do you think? I think I like 90 to 92. Even though objectively I know it's not great. I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just
Do you mean the one with the round neck one with the kind of fuzzy bits?
Yeah.
I remember seeing that kit.
Actually, no, hang on. 92 to 94 is good as well with the Umbro one. I like that.
I remember thinking, I'm gonna hate myself. That when I saw the kind of the Old Trafford picture, thinking that was classy. Yeah, there we are.
To talk just quickly on hair, I'm talking about the weather. When I was looking at the pitch, the first thing, the colour and appearance, it actually made me think of Donald Trump's hair. It had that really kind of fuzzy look to it because of all the frost and stuff.
Yeah. It's just, it's sort of the standard of the picture makes it quite hard to see exactly what nick the kit was in, but it does have that kind of layered, textured, feathered hair that one might ask for in the hairdressers at some point, sort of in that era. But also the leader of the free world right now.
Yeah. It's an interesting point you made about the short sleeve because I think the thing that struck me the most about this game was the sheer intensity and aggression of United It was properly exhilarating to watch. I just had particularly in the second half, actually, I just had a big dumb grin on my face most of the time.
I also absolutely loved watching this one, and that was what made me think about the Keegan pre-match interview.
Yeah.
And that line that Roy Keane said, "You don't contest football matches in the normal state of mind," or whatever he said, something words to that effect. Because some games are going to require a calmness, and other games are going to require a viciousness.
Yeah, and it was quite clear in advance which this would be.
And it's very obvious that, if you're that far off the top in a game that you've got to win in a nasty, cold, horrible Old Trafford night where you need the crowd up, and the atmosphere that day was immense.
Yeah.
Then you need the players to lift it from the beginning, and you can't just turn up and say we're going to play our game. You need to get in amongst it, and that was the thing. Like right from the beginning, United went at them.
Yeah, there was. There's one moment that symbolises it. I think it's just for half time when Butt takes out both Steve Watson and Phil Neville with the same tackle. It just showed how rabid United were. This really kind of animalistic intensity all the time. And the other thing is, what really helped is they got off to a flyer both halves, scored quite early.
Right from the beginning of the game, Keane, even before the goal, Keane has done like 3 or 4 tackles, breaking forward, running past men. Even in the first 5 minutes, is proper tone-setting stuff from him.
Yeah, it made me think of, not quite as symbolic or obvious, but it made me think of the Galatasaray 4-0 when he went and harassed 2 guys straight from the kickoff and basically kicked them up in the air and kind of set the tone. But it was similar with this. He goes on a great run, actually. You're right. Just before the goal, he almost gets through himself. And then Cole scores in the 6th minute, which I checked. It's actually his first touch against Newcastle, first touch of the game, and therefore his first touch against Newcastle since leaving them.
That's decent. It's a great goal. To go through the goal, like the break, it's sort of a counter because it starts with a really good interception by Gary Neville, and then Giggs brings the ball away, and he has Eric on one side, but he sees a much harder, much more incisive pass on the other side, and the vision and execution are basically absolutely perfect. So he curves the ball into the path of Cole, and Cole's just in this perfect position where he can kind of look straight down the diagonal from where he stood to just inside the far post, and it's almost like he's aiming that he can almost sight it. And I think Cernicek might have felt like it was going near post. And you go, and Martin Keiler says it's Giggs to Cole, and then it goes
yeah. It's great, isn't it? There's a lovely noise.
And Fergie goes absolutely wild on the bench immediately. And even though that sort of tells you what a big goal it is, because he knows there's only 6 minutes gone, but we all love a Fergie celebration anyway, but this is a really good one. He's kind of hugging Brian Kidd, who's got this United headband, warmer affair going on. But the finish by Cole, and even now, I still wonder if he sort of heals it slightly. Like, I'm not sure if it comes out right in the middle, but it is a brilliant first-time finish because it stops Cernicek doing anything about it.
He gets the power of a drive with the side of the foot, doesn't he? Or with the heel. It's a brilliant goal. I think you're right because it's bobbling all the way. So, and later in the game, he gets done.
All right, Trevor Brooking.
Yeah, he gets done by the pitch completely. So maybe, but I actually thought in a way the pitch helped him because you can see him concentrate really furiously because he knows it's bobbling, and then he just
that's true. He has, and I think it's to do with the fact that he doesn't have to move. He doesn't have to do anything other than redirect the ball on target because the ball's so perfect and his positioning is so good for where he wants the ball to be. And I think you can see through this whole performance he gives that he's well on the way to becoming a proper all-round centre-forward.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting also, though, because it comes in the context of a diabolical season. He'd scored at Leeds on Christmas Eve, and Andy Gray says he thinks because he scored that goal, he scored this goal. But he'd gone into the game, Ferdinand had scored 18 in, I think, 19 games. Cole had scored 4 league goals that season. And he had a brief little period around here when he was really good, and then he just went to shit for the rest of the season. But I agree, you see enough in his all-round play, particularly a couple of really good pieces of control and a couple of through balls to suggest the player he would become. But it was a bit of a kind of an oasis in the context of his season because the poor bloke had a stinker, didn't he?
Yeah, and as soon as he scores, the whole crowd starts singing Andy Cole, which is just so pleasant because it's like we've taken this player from you, and now we're also relieving you of this song that you enjoyed singing without doing anything other than just like changing a little bit. Yeah. Sorry, not changing anything. I was kind of confusing myself there. Just doing absolutely nothing other than here is the song word for word, and here it is. Enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, and the goal kind of allowed. I don't know if it was the plan, but it allowed United to play on the break most of the time. There were times when it was almost like selective pressing, wasn't it? There were times when they were properly harassing Newcastle, and other times they would let them have the ball for ages and sort of pass the halfway line and then just sting them on the break. I mean, Giggs was absolutely electric, I thought.
He was.
The whole
Straight
game,
after
just carrying
the
the
goal.
ball.
Almost straight after the goal, Gary Nev does a little duck inside there's Ferdinand. And the crowd absolutely love it. And I remember this phrase that he uses, I think, in 98, 99, when he talks about his little cameos at centre-back. But Fergie always used to say he would be a centre-back and then moved on to saying if he was a bit taller, he'd be a centre-back.
Check the milkman or something.
But he had a brilliant game that night.
I thought, actually, he was probably because I remembered Keane, Giggs and Cantona playing really well, but actually Gary Neville was an absolute sensation against Ferdinand. And one thing that interested me about this game is I think it's the first time that group, the class of 92 as they would become known, realised they could bully elite teams, because they probably had one great performance before that at Blackburn when they won at the start of the season, but that was more a case of outplaying them, whereas here they outplayed them, but they also bullied Newcastle. So it feels like it was a bit of a revelation for them, because their record in big games until that point in the season have been poor, hadn't it?
Yeah, but they're you can see the players kind of growing. And I think one of the things that struck me most also was the performance of Cantona, particularly in the first half.
Outstanding.
Just the assurance. And watching him reminded me of the kind of idiosyncratic upright way that he would move with the ball. Because I remembered it took me back to the playground, really, where you'd be kind of walking in the playground with the collar of my blazer up and 7 Cantona chalked on the back, and just altering my gait, just messing around. And even the kids who didn't support United would all be trying to strut about, trying to play in that upright way that Cantona played. But the time he had on the ball and his composure and how strong he was on the ball was really right there that night, where he didn't have a brilliant game, his best game, but the way that he played, you can see, was tone setting and inspirational to the others, because it was showing them that this is how you address a big game where like it's yours already.
Yeah. Yeah. Just his awareness, and there's so many times he sees passes not only that other players wouldn't see, but you don't even see yourself watching it on TV. I thought you're right. First half in particular, he was superb. And actually he completely overshadowed Ginola. There was a lot of talk before the game about their head-to-head, because I think they'd had a bit of needle, and it was quite unusual at that time to have two big players from the same country coming up against, that wasn't British and Irish, obviously, coming up against each other. But Ginola didn't do a lot. In fact, most of Newcastle's attackers didn't do much. They only had one big chance, didn't they? Ferdinand in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Newcastle, this Newcastle team, is that when you look back at it, you think, well, Beardsley was a great player, but he was 35. And Les Ferdinand was a good player, but he wasn't just that level above that you need to make the difference at the crucial moments, I think.
Although he was having a sensational spell, 18 and 19, I think.
Yeah, Les Ferdinand was a really good player, but there's a difference between Ferdinand and Cantona.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, totally.
And that's basically the difference between Newcastle and United in the end.
Yeah.
Is someone who's going to make sure it gets done when you need it, when you need someone to make sure it gets done. And I think even the chance that he misses is because we'd heard him unfavourably compared with Cole previously, but there are those games, and it's it sounds weird to sometimes. Players often get criticised and say, you've got your score like that. Where if you actually think about it, most big chances are missed.
Yeah. But
somehow the best players find a way of making sure that they miss some chances, but when they need to score, they score, and that's what you saw with Andy Cole. Never mind Cantona.
Yeah.
The other thing I enjoyed in that first half was when Phil ploughs through Keith Gillespie and no one gives a fuck.
I know there was a few. In fact, Phil Neville was probably the dirtiest player on the pitch. As a tackle on Ferdinand in the second half as well. Yeah, Gillespie went off with a groin injury, didn't he? And I think he was out for a while, which didn't help them. There's also a lovely moment when Gary Neville wins a sort of 60-40 with Ginola and pointedly follows through and sends him up in the air. It was full of moments like that.
Take the ball and then clatter the man. The kind of thing that you're not you can sort of still get away with it, but then it was just, well, that's not a problem at all.
Yeah, no, I know exactly. There are loads of challenges like that. The Ferdinand chance is worth just saying. Schmeichel made a really good save, sort of half-star jump. And it hit the
it made me think actually
because trousers.
I was watching Spurs last week and I was thinking Son is probably about the best one-on-one finisher around at the moment. So I was kind of thinking, who are the best one-on-one finishers?
Yeah, Son is brilliant, isn't he? Yeah.
I think he's the best at the moment because he has that ability to go through and he's not worrying about getting caught. And as someone with a fat ass who spent a lot of my crap football career playing centre forward, that's always a worry that when you go through that someone might catch you. It's why Cavani tried that chip against PSG. It was only we talked about this because he knew that someone was up his arse and he had to finish quickly. And it's the same with. I remember Beckham scores a goal against Birmingham in 2003, where Veron puts him through and chips the goalie, and he says, "I'm not really the man for one-on-one." And what he actually means is, "I got no pace."
Yeah.
But Son, I think, has that notion that no one's going to catch him, and it enables him to make his mind up and be composed when he arrives there. And I mean, Cantona was really good at one-on-ones because he had just enough pace. He wasn't the quickest, but he was quick enough.
Yeah, exactly, and he stayed calm. That's the thing, as Son does as well.
Whereas Ferdinand, it feels a bit like he thinks that just what he does will be enough. He doesn't arrive there with a plan.
No, I know what you mean. It's almost like just whether he's 20 yards out or 8 yards, just drive it hard and low and see what happens.
There was another moment, also another Schmeichel moment, just after that actually sort of was just as pointed about, reminding me of how good Schmeichel was Ginola goes down the wing and he slings over a brilliant cross. And Schmeichel just comes and takes it. And I can't really remember, like goalkeepers don't really do that anymore. Maybe it's because we see fewer crosses. But David De Gea definitely doesn't do that. No. Where it's a cross, it's not quite penalty spot, but you're thinking like where the striker would want to get it. And he doesn't think about it. He just comes and he takes it. And it's that kind of dominant goalkeeper that I don't know if it doesn't exist anymore, but there aren't a lot of goalkeepers that do that.
No, it's a fair point. Mind you, that I don't think there were that many then. Schmeichel was certainly exceptional. Even a great goalkeeper like Seaman, I remember a couple of times when he would get called out by Wenger for staying on his line. Do you remember the goal when United drew 1-1 in 2000, just after Brazil, and Seaman cocked up, he came for Giggs' cross and gave it to Beckham, and Sheringham scored. That was in response to Wenger basically telling him he wasn't coming for enough crosses. So it feels like, but I know what you mean. I think it did happen a bit more, and obviously there were more crosses. There are a hell of a lot of Newcastle crosses in this game, actually.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking back to that because I just looking back at my notes and that Gary Neville tackle, and Andy Gray goes, well, we all knew who was winning that one, and it certainly wasn't the Frenchman. And it made me think of, like when you hear like elegant variation.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of every time. It reminded me of Michael Van Gerwen, actually, who Roy Keane's performance also reminded me of Michael Van Gerwen. It's just like absolute vicious intensity. But whenever Michael Van Gerwen talks about Raymond van Barneveld, he refers to him as my fellow countryman. He's learned his English from Sporting Cliche. And Sporting Cliche has told him that every time someone mentions Raymond van Barneveld to him, he has to say your fellow countryman. So he now says Raymond van Barneveld, my fellow countryman.
That's tremendous. I hadn't spotted that, actually.
And it's part of that whole sporting vernacular and cliche, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where
Fellow.
I interviewed Raymond van Barneveld. I've interviewed him a few times. I interviewed him once and I said to him, have you ever thought that the fact that you're tall makes it easier for you to throw your darts? Because the way you chuck them, you float them in and you're thrown down. Whereas I used to say about, I can't remember who it was, I think it was maybe Keith Deller, that he's throwing uphill.
Yeah.
And I would say, do you think there's any man in the world that has thrown more darts than Raymond van Barneveld?
Possibly not. Taylor, maybe.
Maybe Phil Taylor, right? And I said to him, do you think it's easier for you because you're tall? And he said, I don't know. I've never thought about it. I just absolutely baffled me. You've thrown more darts possibly than any human being that's ever existed, and it's never occurred to you, and you are also tall, and it's never occurred to you that these two things combine well.
Sportsmen, not many, sportsmen like to go on instinct a lot of the time, don't they?
That's exactly what MVG says. MVG says, I don't aim, I throw on instinct.
Yeah.
Which I was trying to unpick how that works. Does it mean that he's not looking directly where it is, but he sort of knows where it is and he's just chucking it in that direction?
Yeah, I think quite possibly. I don't know. I don't know. I could
or he doesn't take long enough to think about where it's going.
But you're right. Those combination finishes there've been so many brilliant ones, and they are so quick, aren't they? He doesn't have time really. You're right. It must just be muscle memory and so familiar of where everything is on the board.
So when David Beckham takes a free kick, what level of calculation do you think is going on?
I think more with that
because you see, say, like the way that Johnny Wilkinson would kick for goal, and he's literally like he's almost doing, he's using his arms as almost like, I don't know, like a set square or whatever it would require to do that. But because there's some level of like mathematical aptitude where you're measuring angle of elevation, velocity, spin, all those things, like a level of that is geometry or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if that's the correct term. Probably is geometry, I think, where they're able to calculate that. I wonder if it's transferable.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I don't know. Players who you think of who do play on instinct a lot, someone like Giggs, for example, used to speak about how all his best moments in football basically wasn't thinking. But with dead balls like Beckham, I don't know, I think there's a fair amount of calculation you would think. It should be transferable, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Giggs says about not thinking, maybe it's also that you don't know that you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you're just seeing it. You're seeing it so quickly that you're almost in.
It's
you're almost in a trance.
Yeah, totally. And there's that lovely example of that is Maradona's goal. I think we've spoken about it before, actually, when he against England when he went round Shilton, and in that moment, and everything was going on, he still had a memory of Wembley in 1980 when he had a similar chance and put it wide of the far post. And his brother, I think, said to him, "Why don't you go round him?" And even in that split second, he's got that memory. It's just, it's actually slightly scary when you think about how much.
Well, that's what KP says. Everything slows down, but time passes really quickly. So you've batted a session and you come off and you feel like you've only been out there 10 minutes.
It's scary when you think about how much sportsmen can calculate in a split second. Yeah, it does my head in a bit, actually.
Well, that's the thing, is when people say that these people, like when they're dismissed as like it's only sport or there's no thought involved, which is actually like it's really not the case. They just make it seem seamless.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Bergkamp's a good example. Like, you look at all his great moments, and there's so much going on in no more than 1 or 2 seconds. It really is slightly freaky to think about.
Yeah, and it's the ability also, I guess, to do it under pressure.
Yeah, precisely.
Just to be totally impervious to all the other things that are going on in your life.
Yeah.
There's a funny moment just after all of this where Beresford gets mixed up with Warren Barton, gets booked and gets sent off mistakenly while bleeding all over himself.
Yeah, because Ferdinand that was Ferdinand's best header of the night, wasn't it? He nutted Beresford while trying to clear a corner. So Beresford had blood all over him. And the ref actually sent him off. Keegan's going mental on the touchline, not realising that the ref's already accepted his error and apologised. They're not, I mean, everyone said the two blonde fullbacks, they're not that similar looking.
I mean, maybe it is. You've both got bad hair, so I'm going to deliberately mix you up as a lesson. There was also one other great moment just before half time that I felt like resonated for me anyway, where Eric plays a first time flick and Beckham doesn't read it. Now the reality is that he probably wasn't getting there, even if he has read it. But Eric's disappointment and annoyance is visible. And I just remember, I didn't have to say anything, but I'm just thinking that if you were the recipient of Eric's disapproval, you would be fucking sure not to do that again and pay more attention next time.
Yeah, it's a different kind of disapproval to Keane, isn't it? That would affect you in a slightly different way. Because Keane also administers or demonstrates his disappointment a few times in this game in a more voluble way.
Yeah, but with Eric, it's like you ruined my art.
Yeah, exactly.
Keane, and it's more like, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, especially,
and also you're showing off to your friends.
Especially for the young players who idolised Eric as well.
Yeah, exactly that. It's that way of maintaining standards, and we talked about this a little bit before, but it's the same with Keane, that when he was captain, the shouting and the stuff is it's part of it, but it's not really about that. It's about your own standards are always so high that they inspire the standards of other people. And I think that's how it was with Eric as well. That
you get a little bit of that with Bruno as well at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, he is the soul of that team. He is the conscience of that team.
Yeah.
Because you know that not only will he put it in every game, he delivers and he puts it in. And when you have those two things, that's leadership, basically.
Keane was so good in this game. Just the one thing that interested me though is that, because I think I've spoken about this before, I think Keane's most underrated trait was his passing, and there isn't actually that much of it in this game. It's more about tackles and also quite a few runs with and without the ball. Yeah, exactly. And then when he goes to centre back in the second half because May gets injured. Basically, Ferdinand throws him on the floor like a wrestler, and May does his hamstring as he's falling.
Because even in a sport like cricket, where the captain actually does stuff, like he has to decide whether to bat or bowl, how to rotate his bowlers, what the field placings are, like that's a lot of work.
Yes.
But great captaincy, the key element of great captaincy is still leading from the front.
Yeah, it is. And that's
like there's one Mike Brearley, and that's why we talk about him. And there's one John Abrahams who got the gold award for when Lanky won the B&H, despite he scored a duck and take no catches and take no wickets. But these things are outliers because ultimately leadership is you can only really lead if you're turning it out yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see a kind of psychological exploration of how someone like Keane does inspire people. What does it actually do to elevate standards?
There's a thing on YouTube that I posted on our Twitter yesterday, actually, which has various different United players talking about Keane. Giggs starts off by saying that the first time Keane came to his attention was in the 1992 League Cup final when he clattered him.
Yeah. They all pretty much the whole dressing room had not tear up, but squared up to him before he just joined, didn't they? But they all said Ferguson should sign him as well.
I remember reading a story where I don't know if this is true, where Keane, but I haven't made it up. Where Keane turns up on the first day and says, "You don't like me, and I don't like you. Let's get on with it." But I think the thing is they all did like him.
Yeah, no, they
like the stories they tell of Keane is very different to what we think about Keano.
Yeah,
like Keane is the man who'll do anything for the team, who is just great company, and Keano is this balling leader. But the reality is that two sides of the same coin, and you need both of them because ultimately, as a leader, if everyone hates you, you're not going to last very long.
It's interesting to watch. This is where, I mean, at the time I was massively opposed to selling it, but it makes sense more and more as time went on, and particularly because it allowed Keane to become the governor, if you like. And this season was quite pivotal, wasn't it? Because he had Butt alongside him. I still think his first great season was probably 96, 97, but you can see in this game, even though he plays half of it at centre half, and certainly later in the season, and particularly in the FA Cup final against Liverpool, you can see that he's becoming the player who would be probably definitely the most important player in English football for about 5-6 years.
Yeah, one of my favourite Fergie lines is about Keane, where he makes his debut for Liverpool against for Forest against Liverpool, and he banjos John Barnes, and after 5 minutes, and Fergie tells him exactly what he's going to do to him, and it was just the start of an incredible debut. Then he goes, "We tried to buy him straight away. He played against us 3 weeks after that. That's why we watched him at Liverpool, because we were due to play them at Old Trafford. They beat us 1-0, and at the kickoff, the ball went back to Robbo, and he cemented Robbo right away."
It's a great phrase.
Cemented is just a great line.
It is brilliant, but Robbo didn't play in that game.
Classic Fergie.
But it is cemented is a wonderful line.
Then he goes, "Now that's not a reason for signing a player, but it told you something about his attitude. Playing in the big arena didn't faze him one bit, and Robson didn't intimidate him in any way, which you would find quite surprising because in Robson's house iron days, he tended to do that to everyone, including his own players, the kind of personality he had. From that moment on, we targeted him."
Yeah, it may be. I don't know. I'm pretty certain Robson didn't play in that game, but I'm sure there was a time when Keane did cement him.
I don't believe it. Fergie being economical with the truth. I'm not having it.
Yeah, I'm not getting into that.
One of the world's great dissemblers. The other thing about Keane is that he says, "Aggression is what I do. I go to war. You don't contest football matches in a reasonable state of mind."
It's a great line, that.
And it's just, that's the thing, is because everyone knew it. So if you're playing against him, you know that is what he thinks, and he's going to be in proximity to you. Good luck, mate.
Yeah, there's a point where Peacock briefly takes him on when he fouls him, and they have a bit of an exchange of views, but it doesn't last too long.
And so United are 1-0 up at half time, and they have played really well in the first half.
Yeah, Newcastle had more of the ball, didn't they? They don't give possession stats, but it feels like, I don't know, maybe 55-45. But United are just so much more dangerous when they have it, particularly on the break.
And then May goes off at half time, and Fergie brings on McClair and sends Keane to centre back, which tells you exactly what he thinks of McGibbon. Yeah. He's literally on the bench to make up the numbers.
Yeah, I wonder who was shitting themselves more at the prospect of McGibbon going, "Oh, would it be Fergie or would it be McGibbon?" Because his only previous game had been that York nightmare.
They used to say that Robson would finish at sweeper when Robson was coming.
Yeah, that's right.
He never did. And they also thought that about Keane, but I wondered if, like, the game. Do you remember the Cup semi-final in '95 when you played at centre back and you played all right, but one of the reasons why Palace got a replay was because Keane at set pieces, I thought.
Yeah, Yeah, Robson played a sweeper a bit under Fergie, but not towards the end of his career. And it didn't last long. Yeah, and you just lose. He was a good centre, a very good centre, particularly in his prime. He could be, but you just lose too much in midfield. It worked okay in this game because they were camped fairly deep, and him and Gary Neville were shut down Ferdinand and Ginola in the second half because he went in field. They shut them down pretty easily, really.
Yeah, I mean, so United start the second half well again, actually. And then they win a corner down the right after 52 minutes, and Keane goes forward, and Tyler points it out that he's coming to do some business because United don't have much aerial power either. And it's quite funny the way it works out because Phil gets on the ball and he hits this incredible long diagonal pass to Keane, who takes it down beautifully, and there's no one near him because he stood up from the corner, and he almost sort of karate kicks it into the net. But Andy Gray thinks that it's Beckham,
Yeah,
because the pass is so good, and he has one of those great imagined conversations where he goes, "Watch Giggs come into the picture. Look, he wants it. Give me it," he says. "Give me the ball." "You can't have it," he says. "I've spotted something." And then he goes, "When you want composure, well, Roy Keane is all of that and more." What a finish!
It's a great goal.
I'm so crap at accents. I apologise to everyone for that.
Phil Neville was brilliant around that time, but there was some really, really quality assists. Obviously, he set up Eric's goal in the return game. There was a lovely cutback for Sharp against City in the FA Cup. I was thinking how similar. I know Eric's goal against at St James's was a volley, but there were quite a lot of similarities with the Keane goal. Basically, the position he receives it, and then the position he puts it back in the far corner. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a brilliant goal. Just before that, actually, there was another really nice move when Giggs hit the bar after Beckham and Cole had opened them up.
So there was it was the combination between Eric and Cole, which was not for the first time that day, was nice because that was one of the things that we'd sort of wondered about, whether Cole and Cantona could play together, because they didn't seem on the first wavelength, on the same wavelength initially.
No.
And I remember there was a joke going around at the time, why has Cantona got dust on his collar from carrying Cole? And that was kind of how people viewed it. But Cole, we saw in this game that Cole's awareness, his intelligence, his movement, his touch, I mean, everything is there. It's just a case of pulling it all together. And it felt like it was kind of 97, 98 when that really started to properly happen for him.
Yeah, maybe the back end of 96-7 when he came. But you're right. His only real problem in 95-6 was confidence. That was it, really. And it just got worse and worse, apart from a brief window around Christmas.
Yeah, because I mean, I always wondered with him at this point if he'd just scored that goal against Blackburn in the first game, the first second.
Yeah, I know.
Game,
yeah,
if that would have changed that period for him. But I think there's probably an element of him having to learn a different kind of game.
Definitely.
At Newcastle, it's more about Beardsley runs down the sides of defenders, runs in the middle, one-touch finishes. Whereas at United, there's just a whole different thing that's expected of him because he's expected to come deep. Cantona's going to go behind him. He's got to get involved in the game.
Yeah, they bought a goal scorer and turned him into a footballer, basically. And I remember Fergie spoke about it a lot at the time, the amount of work they were doing in training on his link play. And it definitely paid off. There were some brilliant assists once he reached his peak. I mean, the famous one is Juventus, obviously, which it's not a cross, it's a pass that he puts on York's head, basically. There's a lovely one against Aston Villa in December 97, like a flick, half-volley flick with the outside of the foot over the defence for Giggs to score. I don't think he could have done those things, not just at Newcastle. I don't think he could have done them, certainly not consistently early on at United. But you do see enough here, though. I agree. I was slightly surprised by how accomplished some of his link play was in this game.
Yeah, what I think about Cole is he's a really good combination of intelligence and directness, where he doesn't, when he's playing well, that he's looking to get the ball to the goal as quickly as possible.
Yes,
but he's not rash in the way that he goes about it. So if he needs to shift it one more, he's confident enough to shift it one more. And what you get from him is just a lot of varieties of finish, like the drives into the near post drives when he's kind of in front of goal but over towards one side.
Yeah,
the finish, the low finish inside the near post in particular was one he was really good at.
Yep.
But yeah, there was just enough there to make you think that he was going to be a player. But to go back to Keane, Kevin Mook tweeted us and he said, great stuff about how he links to a Keane documentary that's on YouTube. And he says, great stuff about how he changed his body after the cruciate injury. Interesting question is, if he never does his cruciate in 97, does he become the incredible dominant force from 98 to 02?
I think he does. I think he was already getting there. I think it probably raised his intensity and levels of purpose even higher. I think a combination of probably the self-loathing and disgust at the injury, and also the fact that Arsenal won the double while he was away, and everyone was talking about Vieira and Petit. So maybe, but I still think in 96-97, I think he was the best player in the league.
He did, and the really good long interview he did with Off the Ball, he talked a lot about the time he had off, where he thought a lot about changing his life, and he just became like totally obsessed with nutrition. Like if you see how lean and pinched and demonic he is.
Yeah, his body fat levels were a joke, weren't they? Weren't they like 5 or something?
To the point where he was almost making himself unwell.
Well, actually, No, he did. Do you know why he the Invincibles game, the 49 not out? He missed that because he was on well, I don't know. He was on some ludicrous diet and he wasn't well, but he was properly unwell. I just assumed he had a muscle injury or something. So I was just thinking, imagine his disgust at missing that game though, because of some extreme diet he'd been on.
Yeah, for sure. Triggs would have got some walks. Triggs basically circumvented the globe during that one.
Yeah,
but he changed everything that he thought and just committed everything to being the best possible footballer that he could. So I think he was, as you said, he was on his way to becoming the best. But it did sound from hearing him talk like there's an extra level, an extra couple of percentage points that getting that injury caused him to reevaluate. So although the obvious footballing ability was there, and when people talk about nutrition, it's not a very large percentage of the thing. It's not, so when people talk about Wenger and the nutrition, that's not why Wenger was a brilliant manager. Wenger was a brilliant manager because he was really good at motivating, spotting a player, organising them, whatever it was. The nutrition was just a really small point, but when you have things that are decided on very small points, every little bit helps.
Oh yeah, totally. I still think he would have been the best player in England, but maybe you're right that there was just an extra little bit a bit of intensity that gave him and focus.
And the thing is as the game pans out, United are much more likely to score a third than Newcastle get a second.
Two gorgeous breaks, aren't they, when they almost score? I'm trying to remember which order. So the first one is when Giggs puts Beckham through, Cernicek saves, and then he saves Cole's follow-up. And Giggs was fantastic. 3 killer through balls he plays. 1 for the goal, and 1 for this chance, and 1 for the next big chance.
Yeah, I used to think that Giggs sort of developed his football brain late in life, but the more I remind myself of mid-90s Giggs, the more I think I'm talking bollocks.
Yeah.
And he always had it.
Well, yeah, and particularly around this period, for a few years, you missed him so much, didn't you, when he didn't play? This game is completely different if Giggs is still injured.
Yeah, because it's the balance. It's partly what he allows other people to do. That if the play's stretched, then it's just so much more room for the opposition. Can't just leave Ryan Giggs alone.
No,
and it stretches their back four, and it just allows you to use the width of the pitch. Which generally, if you're the better team, you want to make the pitch big.
Yeah,
just the way that he's able to cover distance and just to inject pace into an attack just by taking one man out of the equation. Makes a massive difference if you don't have him, and that's why Fergie signed Blomqvist.
There's not a huge amount of pace in this United team, is there? There's a lot of players who are, as you always say about Eric, quick enough. Beckham, Keane, but Giggs and Cole are probably the only real flyers in there. So Giggs becomes so important because of that. The amount of times he carries the ball kind of 50, 60 yards.
And it also shows you that pace isn't just about. I think they call it foot speed now.
Yeah,
as though it could be it might be flying speed, but it's also about how quickly you think and how quickly you move the ball.
Yeah.
So you're right that this isn't a team with a lot of fast players, but it's a fast team.
Yes.
And whereas the current United team has more fast players, but they don't play quickly like this often enough.
That's a really good point. That's probably my biggest thing that struck me this game was just the sheer aggression of United with and without the ball. Fantastic, so dynamic. Newcastle were actually really ponderous, weren't they?
Yeah, because they didn't have any speed, and they had Beardsley who thought very quickly, but it's not enough. Like when you actually look at the Newcastle team, it's like it does lack that midfield basically. Like it doesn't have enough class in midfield. I mean, they scored enough goals, they attacked well enough and scored enough goals because they had Gillespie and Ferdinand and Beardsley, which is 3 players that are going to combine to create goal-scoring opportunities against most teams. But when it comes to a big game like this, there's just something a little bit something missing, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
I mean, well, Keegan thought it as well because he bought a Spreer.
Yeah, he gets a lot of we'll probably come on to that. I thought that was a reasonable decision. I don't think that's the reason they lost the league, because you can actually see the away form ultimately cost them, and obviously the defeat to United at home, but that was the only time they lost at home. But it's already starting to happen. This defeat is the 5th game without a win away from home. 3 draws, 2 defeats, 1 at United.
I think they've gone behind in most of them as well.
Yeah, so it's already starting to happen.
You're throwing uphill basically at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And the game's it's pretty comfortable, isn't it? There's one more big chance for United, but another fantastic break. Cantona with a lovely bit of control, lay off to McClare, ball down the right to Giggs, who makes this brilliant angle run, and then plays a reverse pass around, but basically wrong. The last defender overbalances, I think it's Barton, through to Cole.
What's that?
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, that's like literally the most mid-90s soccer AM horrendous shout. Right.
And then Cole slices it miles wide and looks straight at the pitch, and Andy Gray says he got horrendous bobble.
A bit of a bobble there, Trevor Brooking,
yeah.
Exactly.
It's a shame, because it's a brilliant. I think that might be my favourite, apart from the first goal, my favourite move of the match. In McClare's pass is brilliant, but Giggs' run and then first time pass around in the opposite direction is just gorgeous.
Right, and I noticed the advertising hoardings at that point as well. There was one for Nintendo that properly made me think, oh. And then there was one for High Tech that made me remember.
Oh my God.
Around the time I was getting into trainers, and my parents just totally didn't get it.
Yeah.
So the most they would stretch to was this pair of High Tech boots with this humongous tongue behind which I did up the laces. And when all was said and done, they were still High Tech, and I remember getting loads of stick for them in the changing rooms at school.
Yeah, High Tech were never hip, were they?
What happened to High Tech? Do they still exist?
I don't know. Actually, I was thinking.
Actually, I say they do. I have High Tech squash shoes. I don't know if they do anything else.
I might wear High Tech shoes next time I go to the Guardian, see if I can start a trend.
There might be now a new trend. Exactly. Well, do you remember Green Flash came back?
Yeah, massively. I never really bought into that, but they did. Yeah, I can picture one of my best mates actually with his beloved Green Flash on.
They did a Blue Flash as well.
Did
like they diversified into other kinds of flashes. It was just that was so. I felt like that will not be possible because that's so bound up with changing room abuse for the kids.
Yeah.
Because when I started secondary school, like on the uniform list was Green Flash, and I turn up for PE in my Green Flash, and I'm the only kid in the class wearing Green Flash. Everyone else is wearing actual trainers. It's just monumental shame. And then so I get my good pair of trainers, but they are High Tech. It's just all wrong. Yeah. My daughter will never complain that I don't understand her thirst for trainers.
I bet you didn't walk like Eric in your High Tech.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, this game, I was thinking, there's like a subgenre of game, isn't there, when an established superpower are underdogs at home, and then you get that kind of unique defiance from the players and the crowd. I was trying to think of other times when it's happened with United. The obvious one is Fletcher's goal when they beat Chelsea in 2005. And obviously the Invincible game, which is slightly different.
The Chelsea one I felt was a bit different because that United were like wasn't people getting ahead of themselves. Chelsea were the best team. True. United were in transition, but I was looking at it slightly differently. I can't remember where I read this phrase. It's probably an American phrase, sunning off, where you would say United sunned off Newcastle in this game, where you've got like the kind of either the older brother or the dad, and the child thinks that they're there and they try it on and they get a sunning off.
Well, actually, and funnily enough, Newcastle had one the previous year, hadn't they? At Old Trafford, 2-0 again when Gillespie scored that brilliant goal. They were top of the table then and went into freefall.
And United sunned them off. Yeah. So I guess it's what might happen when United play Liverpool next.
Yeah, I feel maybe so.
It's that kind of thing. But I mean, you saw it with United and Juventus as well. United thought they were good, and they got big brothered by Juventus.
Yeah. That's one of my favourite kind of arcs in the history of United. That Juventus period from '96 to '99, getting absolutely roasted in the first game, playing well but losing at Old Trafford, then beating them, then bloody letting them qualify. And then finally, then getting a lesson at Old Trafford in the first half in '99 before finally.
It's like the first time you beat your dad at something.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
Or the last time your dad whacks you. I remember the last time my dad whacked me, and like it was from behind, knocked me off a chair. because I was there to my mum. I earned it. I deserved it. And then I stood up and I felt like quite a lot bigger than you now. And like there was no there was no kerfuffle or anything. But it's like that moment where it feels like, yeah, that particular dynamic in the relationship changes where it's, and do you have an older brother?
Yes.
So you must probably have a better experience of this than me.
Yeah. No, all I can think about now is that Limmy sketch when he kills his dad. Do you remember that? Where he goes, it's just him talking to the camera. And he goes, "I'll switch you off, your cunt," and then he strangles him, and then he calls someone, "Kill my dad." Sorry, I really wish I could find it. It was in one of those long. It was one of those long YouTube things, like 3 hours or something. I must dig it out. Actually, it always makes me laugh.
And it's that where like what you've got here is like the kind of like the dad raises himself up to his full height. It's not yet.
What is interesting is this. We know obviously what happens eventually. United reel Newcastle in, Keegan loses it and everything, and this is the start of that really. But actually, it's interesting that for the next month, United are dropping points and Newcastle aren't. Newcastle won their next 5. United got stuffed at Spurs, obviously, on New Year's Day, drew with Villa. So actually, everyone said it was a much must-win for United because it reduced it to 7 points. But they end up in a almost as bad a position as if Newcastle had won because basically, let me think about it. In mid-Feb, Newcastle were 9 clear with a game in hand on United. So it sort of, maybe it was a must-win psychologically and in terms of undermining Newcastle because they had a lot of tough away games to come as well. Arsenal, Liverpool, and Forest.
Yeah, we got an email from Patrick. I was going to say Patrick No One.
Actually,
I'm sure he's used to this. Patrick Noon, who says that Newcastle match was the first game I ever went to as a 6-year-old. Got the supporters coach up from Oxford with my dad and sat way up in the newly built North Stand. Can remember very little about the game itself, apart from the fact that it was freezing, and I have a vivid memory of my dad screaming, "To Eric, pass it to Eric," right before Giggs rightly ignored him and played it to Cole for the first goal. Also, I'm certain I remember there being an announcement at the end that the win put United 7 points behind Newcastle. I'm not sure that kind of thing is normally announced at the ground, but I'm sure that it happened.
I'm sure he's right. It was a lot of talk about it at the time, the kind of the context. But that's interesting. It's really unusual, isn't it? To announce, I can't imagine what sort of format that announcement would take. Like triumphant, but what do you say? And now we're only 7 points behind. I don't know.
It is strange, but it's sort of almost like the kind of thing that you imagine Dastardly Fergie would have asked them done. Like, when we win, do this to tell them so that they hear that we're coming.
Yeah,
I don't know,
and eventually they were coming. I don't think United get enough credit for their run because these crazy winning runs would become quite normal, but United at the end of that season won 19 out of 21 in all competitions to do the double, which is
after Spurs they win 10 and draw 1 in the next 11.
Yeah,
and that is Liverpool used to do it as well. You always and that was one of the things that United sort of took on from Liverpool was those runs where it feels inevitable.
Yeah. When did you think United would win the league that year?
Probably always.
I don't think I did. I wasn't that. I think it was probably after Newcastle lost at Liverpool, I became really confident because there were a hell of a lot, obviously 1-0 Cantonars with Schmeichel making important saves. So United weren't always playing that well, but yeah, I think after they lost at Liverpool, I remember thinking that felt like a really big moment.
Yeah, I think it's just at that point you start to have faith in Fergie and faith in Cantona and faith Cantona, Schmeichel and Keane, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it feels like these motherfuckers will do enough to make sure that it happens, and whatever enough is will be what they'll do. Because you sometimes get a sense. I felt it when City and Liverpool were going for it that season. That even though it was really close, if City had needed 2 or 3 more points, they'd have got them. Because there was just that level of confidence that they had, that other clubs knew that they had, that would enable them to do whatever was necessary to win the title. Yeah. I was starting to feel like that about Fergie and United as well.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful run. A combination, it's always beautiful when you reel a team in, particularly when the media darlings. Arsenal in 02-03 is the other big one. But to combine that with the charm of the kids all winning it in their first season, Cantona's come back, it was just brilliant.
It's the sense of inevitability when you can see it coming and everyone knows that it's coming.
Yeah,
and it was the kind of I even want to really refer to this right now. It was 2012 where I felt that it was going to come, and it came and it came and it came, and then we totally fucked it up.
Yeah. So that was such a weird title race, because you're right. Like, both teams did a Devon Lock at different times. So the United was.
But it feels when it's rolling, when the team who you thought were going to win, the team you thought you were going to win, the team who, like, the old master, when they start rolling, it feels like, get out of the way of that. It feels inevitable.
Yeah.
And it was and with this win, it just sort of felt like, because when you present a team with a must-win game and they win it, then you start to feel like the other things will start to happen, because it will affect the team that win, it would affect the team that lose, and it would affect everyone that those teams have to play.
Yeah, it was a classic example of what John Part used to always refer to Phil Taylor's statement victories. And this was a great example of that.
Yeah, and then obviously United then managed to go and lose to Spurs 4-1.
Yeah, but well, of course, we should say the follow-up to this, because of all the centre-half problems. Yeah, so Pallister, Bruce, May all out, so they signed William Prunier on. Was it just a short-term loan or something, or was it?
I think so, and he plays all right in the first game.
Yeah, doesn't he make one of the goals? His header leads to one.
A header from a corner, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Any other business with this game?
No, I don't think so. I was because I guess we're going to do Spurs. We're going to do that New Year's Day game with Spurs at some point.
Do we? Yeah, I'm sure we will.
I have a story about that Spurs game, but I was going to keep it for then. So,
well, it's up to you. Yeah, might as well.
What a tease!
I'm sure we'll do the return at St James's, which was even more important. I think actually, because that St James's game is so famous and so significant, this is slightly forgotten, I would say.
Yeah, it is, because this was a much better performance from United. It was the best of this team.
Yeah, it was. Just that aggression and intensity was honest. Like we said before, I did just have a stupid grin on my face for most of the game, and the atmosphere was brilliant.
Because it's not a great team, this one, because it's sort of in between. It's in between the first great team and the second great team. So I would say this is more or less like as well as they can play.
Yeah, I would agree. At that point of their development, definitely. And definitely, I would say the best performance of the season. Blackburn away was really impressive as well, but this is even better, I think. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope you've enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please leave us a review, send it around your chat groups, WhatsApp, whatever, and give us a rating in your podcast app.
If you've got a suggestion for a game we should cover in a future episode, or a great story you'd like us to include, email us at unitedrewind@gmail.com or tweet us at unitedrewind.
We're going to take next week off for Christmas, but we'll be back on January the 6th with a bit of third round FA Cup magic. United's thrilling 3-2 win away to City at the Etihad in January 2012.
There's no question about that. Well done, Rob.
See up there. Shut your mouth up, kid. Come on, every weekend. Come on, there.